Ah, Pong. It's a game almost as much fun to watch as it is to play. The original concept was the brainchild of a Mr. Ralph Baer, a television engineer and World War II intelligence, who, while working at Sanders Associates, would come up with the novel idea of building a device that would interface with a product that most people already had at the time, the television set. His prototype was called the Brown Box. It was a system that would allow two people to control lights on the screen. This led to video table tennis and would forever change the world, kicking off the video game industry. Baer's invention would later be picked up by Magnavox and turned into the Magnavox Odyssey. And that's where we'll begin on this build. It's not going to be a recreation of the Brown Box or the Odyssey, just my own spin on a Pong machine. Both the Brown Box and the Odyssey hooked up directly to a television through RF cables. This is going to be an all-in-one system, so we're using LEDs instead of I did a quick test by hooking up 16 LEDs to 2 shift registers. Then once satisfied, moved on to placing them inside of a 3D printed frame. There's 128 total. As I went, I was soldering all the positive leads of the LEDs together horizontally, then hooking it up to a ribbon cable. Next, I slid on a bracket to prevent anything from shorting out, and soldered the negative leads together. And I retested it to make sure that everything was working. Our circuitry isn't going to be nearly as complicated as the original. Instead, it's just going to rely on an Arduino Nano, 3 shift registers, 16 resistors, and some header pins for easy access. After soldering, we ended up with this beautiful board. Onto the code, everything is controlled within a 2D array, where a 1 represents an LED that is on, and a 0 where it represents an LED that is off. A shift register will pull the first column high, then a second shift register will pull only the LEDs that are on low. This process is repeated for each column, then loops. With the display and circuit board done, I moved on to designing the rest of the unit, printing it out, and then assembling. Before we move on, let's discuss gameplay. The gameplay of Pong that you're probably familiar with did not actually come from Ralph Baer's Brown Box or the Odyssey. This version of the game actually allowed the player to move both vertically and horizontally, and even control the ball while it was in motion. The gameplay that we all know and love came from Atari when they released the Pong arcade machine, 1 month before the Magnavox Odyssey was released. Wait, so how is it possible for Atari to have released Pong before the inventor of Pong released it? Well, at the time, Atari claimed that it was just parallel thinking. But, if that's the case, what's Nolan Bushnell's name doing in Magnavox's guest book for the 1972 Electronics Fair? There was a lawsuit, and Atari settled for $1.5 million. So for this unit, I've gone with Atari's gameplay style. It's just better fleshed out and more fun. And how does ours play? Honestly, it's not that great. Each paddle is 3 LEDs tall, so it takes up almost half the play field. So it's almost impossible to miss the ball. And then the ball has a tendency to get stuck in the upper right and left corner. So it's not super fun to play, but it was fun to build. One last thing. Magnavox did not have sound. Neither does this unit. But Atari did. And they went about it in kind of an interesting way. Al Alcorn, the developer of Pong, was told that they wanted the sound of a crowd cheering when a ball was hit, and have the sound of boos when the ball was missed. And here's what it sounded like. And this was 1972, so the way that he went about getting these noises was...
So I simply poked around with a little audio amplifier in the circuit and found tones that sounded about right and wired them in.
So what would our Pong machine sound like if we wired audio up in the same sort of way? For this, all I did was wire an amplifier to a probe and put that into a 3D printed enclosure and connected it to power. And I ended with this, an amp pen, audio pen, amp probe, something like that. And the tones that I'm able to pull off of my board sound something like this. And that's about it.